Okay, assalamu alaikum everyone. I'm going to quickly discuss the rest of the questions of macroeconomics. Question 8a is explained using diagram how the rate of exchange is set in free floating exchange rate system and why it depreciates or appreciates, and consider whether depreciation or appreciation increases national output and inflation rate. Okay, so in this question, first of all, you have to give assessment objective 1. For that, you will have to define what exchange rate is, and then what is free floating exchange rate system. So, and then what is the meaning of depreciation or appreciation. So, exchange rate is the price of a currency in terms of another currency, and free floating exchange rate system is a system in which the price of a currency against other currencies is set through the free forces of demand and supply of that currency. And then you have to move to why it depreciates. You can make the basic graph of exchange for free floating exchange rate system as well. So the graph looks like this. So this is demand of dollars, this is supply of dollars. For example, this is origin point. On x we have quantity of dollars, and this is demand of dollars, and this is supply of dollars. On y we have exchange rate. So equilibrium takes place at E, where exchange rate is set at, let's say, $83, 83 Indian rupees per dollar, and this is quantity. And now when you are talking about depreciation of currency, so depreciation of currency is the fall in value of currency in terms of another currency, and it depreciates for two reasons mainly. One is decrease in demand of currency. For example, if demand for dollar falls, demand for dollar curve will shift to the left to D1, equilibrium will move to E1, where quantity will fall to Q1, and exchange rate will decrease to 80 Indian rupees per dollar. So exchange rate of dollar has depreciated here because exchange rate of dollar was initially 83 rupees and now it is 80 Indian rupees. So now $1 can purchase less Indian rupees, so dollar has depreciated. The other reason can be increase in supply of dollars, and if supply of dollar increases, supply of dollar curve will shift to the right. So this is demand for dollar, this is supply of dollar, and this is origin point. On x we have quantity of dollars, and this is demand of dollar, and this is supply of dollar. Equilibrium is at E, where exchange rate of dollar is let's say 280 Pak rupees. On Y we have exchange rate, and this is quantity of dollars that is being purchased in the market. So increase in supply of dollar will shift supply of dollar curve to the right. So the new equilibrium will now move to E1, where quantity of dollar will increase to Q1 and exchange rate will fall to 250 Pak rupees against $1. So dollar has again depreciated against Pak rupees. And then you have to talk about depreciation, impact of depreciation. When there is like depreciation of currency, it increases exports because price of export falls with the depreciation, and quantity demand for exports will rise. So total revenue from exports will increase. On the other hand, price of imports will rise and quantity demand for imports will fall, because when imports are expensive, less people will buy imported goods, so total expenditure on imports will fall. When total revenue from exports is high, total expenditure on imports is low, then what will happen is export minus import, net export, that is also known as current account of balance of payment, it will improve, right? So it will be positive. So when it is positive, it will increase aggregate demand, because we know that aggregate demand is equal to C plus I plus G plus X minus M. So if X minus M is positive and it increases, then aggregate demand will also rise. So when aggregate demand increases, GDP of the country will also increase, real GDP, and when real GDP increases, it causes economic growth and it increases employment as well. So however, it will cause demand pull inflation. Demand pull inflation will also rise. Demand pull inflation will also rise. For this, like I'm going to make the graph. You need not to make the graph for this last point, but just to show you why all these variables are increasing. So you can look into them through the graph. So this is origin point. On X we have quantity, this is demand of dollar, this is supply of dollar. No, sorry, this is real GDP. I'm going to make aggregate demand and aggregate supply curve. Sorry, I made graph of exchange rate. So this is real GDP and this is aggregate demand, this is aggregate supply. On y-axis we have price level. When we make aggregate demand, aggregate supply curves, we write price level instead of just price. Keep in mind, instead of writing quantity, we write basically real GDP here, and equilibrium takes place at E, where equilibrium output or real GDP is Y and price level is P. Now if there is increase in aggregate demand due to depreciation of currency, then aggregate demand curve will shift to the right and new aggregate demand is AD1, equilibrium will move to E1, so real GDP will rise to Y1, that is economic growth, and price level will increase to P1. So this is why when net exports like X minus M increases, aggregate demand increases. When aggregate demand increases, it shifts to the right, it will increase the price level and it will increase the real GDP, that is Y to Y1. So this is why it causes economic growth and rise in real GDP per capita. Now moving to the next question, part B. Assess whether protectionism is only the way to correct deficit balance of payment. Okay, so again you have to give assessment objective 1 first. Knowledge, that is you will have to define what protectionism is and what are different methods of protectionism and what balance of payment current account is and what is deficit balance of payment. If you explain all these concepts, that is called assessment objective 1, and then you will have to move how protectionism can correct deficit. So protectionism include the methods that are used by the government to correct balance of payment deficit and protect local industry from international competition, and it includes like tariff, quota and embargo. These are the main three, but there are other ways as well, so you need not to explain all of them, but three at least. So protectionism, tariff is a kind of tax that is imposed on imports and it increases the import prices, and as a result imports get expensive, and when imports are expensive, less people will import goods from other countries, so deficit can be, balance of payment deficit can be corrected. So deficit balance of payment is when imports are more than exports, simply, right? The money is going, more money is going out of the country, less money is coming into the country through exports and imports. Okay, so when government imposes tariff or tax on imports, then imports are expensive, as a result imports volume will decrease and deficit can be corrected. On the other hand, quota is a physical limitation that is imposed on the quantity of a certain product that can be imported into the country. It also limits the quantity, so balance of payment is also corrected through that as well. Current account is corrected. And embargo is complete ban, 100% ban. Zero quota or 100% ban is known as embargo. Embargo also helps to correct balance of payment deficit. But on the other hand, you will say that protectionism is not the only way to correct deficit. We can use fiscal policies, we can use monetary policies, and we can use supply side policies as well. So fiscal policy is the policy of taxation and government spending. So if government increases tax on people's income, their purchasing power will fall and they will tend to buy less imported goods, so balance of payment deficit will be corrected. Monetary policy increases interest rate, so people are more inclined towards saving and they spend less, so again volume of imports will come down or decrease. Supply side policies are the policies that manipulate aggregate supply. Fiscal and monetary policies are demand side policies, and supply side policy include like subsidy and capital expenditure on long term projects, education and training of workers. These are education and training of workers and capital expenditure of the government on long term projects. So these are multiple methods of supply side policies or tools of supply side policy. Subsidy to the local producers will help to improve the quality and quantity of goods available in the market in the country. So again it will help to correct deficit balance of payment. Education and training makes people more productive and efficient, so they can save more, they can produce more, local needs can be satisfied, and extra produced goods can be exported to the other countries as well. So you have to explain capital expenditure as well, but you have to give limitations of these as well. Subsidy may be misused education and training provided by the government may be taken for granted, and capital expenditure may be for the political gain, so they will not achieve the balance of payment deficit. And then you will have to conclude it overall. And in conclusion, you will say that protectionism is a good way, but it is not the only way to solve deficit, balance of payment deficit, deficit of current account of balance of payment. Moving to question 9a, explain terms of trade. Terms of trade is the ratio of price of exports and imports, price of export over price of import into 100. This is terms of trade. And terms of trade, favorable means when the answer of terms of trade is greater than 100, it is called favorable terms of trade, and terms of trade when it is less than 100, it is unfavorable terms of trade. So favorable terms of trade occurs when the answer of calculation is greater than 100. Consider favorable terms of trade is always beneficial to an economy. Okay, so then you have to give like some reasons of terms of trade. Moving to favorable state as well. So whenever there is rise in price of export or fall in price of import, whenever numerator is greater, denominator is smaller, answer will be greater than 100, and it will lead to a favorable movement in terms of trade. While price of export may rise because of high demand of exports, and price of import may fall because of lower demand for imports. And then you have to explain if it moves to the favorable state, whether it is always beneficial or not. So in the short run it will be beneficial, because when your exports are expensive, imports are cheaper, in the short run you can benefit from this favorable terms of trade. Employment will increase, aggregate demand in the country will increase, and definitely economic growth will also occur. But in the long run, all these variables will move to the opposite direction, and unemployment may start rising because your exports are expensive, so other people will stop purchasing from you. As a result, exports will fall, and if exports fall, then definitely balance of payment may move to the deficit state, and aggregate demand may fall in the country, because x minus m is the power of aggregate demand. So at the end you will have to conclude that terms of trade has a lot of benefits, but it is not always beneficial, because in the short run it is beneficial, but in the long run it is not. And now moving to the surplus. In current account of balance of payment is not always beneficial, and deficit is not always harmful. Assess this statement. So again you have to basically tell the examiner what surplus current account is, what deficit current account is. You will have to give their definitions, and then you will have to say that how surplus can be beneficial to the country and why it cannot be. Surplus is when exports are more than imports, or the inflow of money is more than the outflow of money from the country. And it is beneficial because it increases aggregate demand, increases employment, economic growth, and there are these are kind of like benefits of surplus. But it causes demand pull inflation in the country, because aggregate demand increases. Surplus aggregate demand is equal to C plus I plus G plus X minus M. So if X minus M is positive, aggregate demand will increase. When aggregate demand increases, it causes demand pull inflation. And on the other hand, deficit is like mainly harmful, because it decreases aggregate demand in the country, because X minus M will be negative, so aggregate demand will overall fall. And when aggregate demand falls, unemployment may rise, GDP of the country may decrease, and economic growth may slow down. But deficit is not always harmful, because if deficit is caused by importing good machinery, technology and tools from the other countries, then it will lead to benefit to the economy in the long run, because you can use that technology to produce greater output in the long run. So and then at the end you will have to give conclusion, summarized conclusion. So this is it. I believe you understand these concepts, and I wish all of you best of luck. And after exam, please share the questions that are tested in the exam, so that we can discuss those questions as well. Thank you so much. Allah Hafiz.